And you will probably see a little box that says you are being recorded, and you can click that, right? All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Let me offer, just to begin by offering just a brief word of prayer. Well, before I do that, I think I'm going to invert this tonight. I thought we would just take a moment to introduce ourselves, and then I'll ask for prayer requests, and then I'll offer prayer. So if you can, I know you've got your autobiography online, but the main thing I'm just curious about is where are you located, and kind of what you're involved in, very briefly. And it's good just so we hear each other's voices. One thing I hate about asynchronous is we don't, other than you having to put up with mine because of the lectures, we really don't get to hear each other a lot. And it's good to have a voice. I'm a big believer in hearing people as well as reading them. So who would go first, just to introduce themselves?
I will.
Okay, thanks, Dan.
My name is Daryl Jones. I live in Aiken, South Carolina, which is about 20 miles east of Augusta, Georgia, if you have any idea what that is. I'm a clinical social worker, and my ministry is actually in therapy and to our church. A little bit more so. I do presentations and lead group discussions, Bible studies, etc. So that's kind of it for me.
Okay. I will say, Daryl, that your mic kind of cuts in and out. I don't know if you have a secondary mic or if it's the mic attached to your
Oh,
computer. But
sorry.
it doesn't interfere when you're not speaking. It also auto mutes, so you're fine.
Okay.
And don't, and still feel free to ask a question or interject. But I just did want to let you kind of know there is a little bit of a
Okay.
vibration going on. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So who's next? Just a word of introduction, like.
Sure.
I'll
I'm
jump in.
okay,
Oh.
go for it, Rhonda.
No, you go. You're already
Okay.
on the screen, so go, man.
All right. I'm Kyle Hug. I am currently a full-time pastor at Bridgeport Community Church in Michigan. It's right in between Saginaw, Michigan and Flint, Michigan. And on 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year, supposedly, I'm a chaplain in the U.S. Army Reserves. Just finished up. All I got left is my master's degree, which hopefully is only about 3 more classes, and then I'll be officially done with that.
Okay. And well, at that point, will you go through full commissioning once you
Yep,
get your degree done?
I'll be fully commissioned as a captain and have to decide if I want to go back active duty or stay in the reserves.
Okay. All right. Good. Good. It's good to have you. And I will say to Daryl, just to know, I know you're on at Aiken, so you're on the western part of the state. My daughter is a strength and conditioning coach at the College of Charleston in Charleston, South Carolina. So we traverse South Carolina on at least 2 or 3 times a year, either driving or else my wife flies in. But it's just part of our regular journey at this point.
Excellent.
All right, who's next? Just introductions.
All right, I'll jump in.
Jump in.
My name is Rhonda Kramer. I've had a variety of teaching positions. I have taught junior high, high school, university, and junior college. I have a master's degree in English literature. I've taught British Lit. I've taught Shakespeare, which is by far my most favorite class ever to teach. My especially interesting time was teaching Shakespeare to business majors. They had avoided their humanities credits like the plague, and then they walked in. I was their last class. They walk in, and I'm dressed as Queen Elizabeth. And they all looked at me and said, okay, this is not your average Shakespeare. And I'm like, no, it's not. I have retired from teaching for now. I have spent the last year and a half teaching in high school, and I just decided I needed a break from student papers. So here I am pursuing a master's, super excited, and I live in Boise, Idaho.
Okay, Rhonda. Well, it's good. My first thought is those business majors going, this is not accounting. We can tell we are not in accounting anymore, but that's
Right.
yeah. I have taught degree completion programs for a lot of people that were involved in business. Most of the time, I drew the short straw with the course on Bible. So never did try to do the Moses look. It just doesn't wear well on me, but I can
Right.
appreciate that. So it's good to have you in class.
Thank you.
Who's next? We're just doing introductions.
I'll jump in.
Okay.
My name is Melissa McKay, and I live in Los Banos, California. I work for our county behavioral health plan. I have a bachelor's degree in behavioral health with an emphasis on trauma, and I'm working towards becoming a pastor. I currently serve my church on the worship team, and I also teach Sunday school.
Okay, Melissa, it's good to have you. And
Thank you.
if you do trauma-informed counseling, Lord bless you in that kind of ministry. So I think we'll say that. So, all right, who's next?
I'll happen.
Okay.
I'm Erin. I'm in Centralia, Washington, so I'm about halfway between Seattle and Portland on I-5. And I work full-time at my church as the family ministry director, and it's the same church I grew up in. But I'm actually in Church of God Anderson, not in Nazarene. So I'm also going through the ordination process through the Church of God.
Okay, good. It's good to have you, Erin. And I actually have had friends who've taught at the School of Theology at Anderson University in the past. So there's been a lot of crossover conversations down, to say the least. And with humor, I'll say this. My wife was born and raised in Anderson, Indiana. So Church of God Anderson was just around every corner, which feels a whole lot like the Church of Nazarene, where our schools are located too. So I'll just leave it at that. All right. We're just doing, for Emily and Josh, we're just doing introductions, just brief ones so we can hear each other. So we're down to the two of you guys. Who wants to draw the short straw?
I'll go ahead and start. Hi, I'm Emily. I live in Nampa, Idaho. Currently, I work for Northwest Nazarene University in the College of Nursing. I'm an executive assistant to the dean at NNU. And then I also am an associate pastor at Vida Nueva Church of the Nazarene here in Nampa. We're currently during transition. 3 weeks ago, our pastor retired. And so, yeah, we're in a transition time. It's, yep.
Well, you have my prayers. I know one thing I do know is that NNU right now actually even has a doctoral program at work with Spanish-speaking leaders in the Church of the Nazarene and elsewhere. So it's probably a good time to be recruiting, I guess is the best way to say it, hopefully, before it's over. So it's good to see you. Josh, talk about location.
Yes, I am, kind of instead of halfway between Portland and Seattle, I'm halfway between Mount Hagen and Minge, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with. I'm here in the Highlands of Papua New Guinea, and we moved here 8 months ago from North Carolina. My wife's a doctor here at the Nazarene Hospital, and I am field systems coordinator, which basically means everything they wanted done for the last 20 years is landing in my lap. But at the moment, that includes, I don't know if I can flip the camera around, supervising the missionary kid recess. So getting a little sunshine in the meantime. I plan to spend my life in the business world. Was a senior director at a publishing company, and before that I'd run a web design company for a while, and then got unexpectedly called us here, and I've been very thankful to find that God had a lot of use for business skills in missions. But one of my roles is helping train up pastors, and it felt disingenuous to do that without any training on my own. And so I'm pursuing ordination to kind of get a better sense of their calling, and to hopefully use my own calling to ministry as a
That's great. And it looks like you've got friends as well. Was that your son or?
That we've got 4 kids, so 2 boys and 2 girls.
Okay. All right. Well, if you have to do, if there are moments you feel like a poser, just enjoy life. And I think you might qualify as the most distant this time around. But actually with Rafi as a part of the class too, I know that she is in Europe and has quite a global expanse as well. So you at least will have multiple perspectives coming into our classroom conversations, to say the least. So welcome. I do want to have a moment of prayer. I mentioned Rafi. She contacted me and there she is, and is not feeling well. So give her a chance to get connected in. Which Hi, Rafi. Can you hear me? It's still connecting. There we go. Rafi, can you hear me?
Yes, Dr. Belovins, I can hear you now.
Okay, good. We were just doing brief introductions. Do you want to just kind of let us know where you're located right now? And it's probably the middle of the night too, so I know that.
Hi, good day, everyone. I'm so sorry for my tardiness. My name is Rafi, and it's so nice to see everyone in person. I'm currently in Budapest. What else?
And
I'm happy to be here.
what time of day is it there?
It's 2:13 a.m.
Okay.
and it's Friday.
Okay.
Early Friday morning.
Okay. Well, and I know, so we're taking prayer requests. I'll just go ahead. I know you had let me know that you've been struggling also with a cold, if memory serves me.
Yeah.
So,
yes, please, pray for healing and, also for, I think healing for people around me as well, because I know a lot of people are struggling with issues, close to me. So just for the Holy Spirit to heal, those around me physically, mentally.
thank you.
And,
Any other requests? Any special needs? No? Well, let me just open with a brief word of prayer then, okay? Gracious God, I thank you. I thank you for my friends here. I thank you for, the work of your Spirit in their lives and their own very unique and different types of callings, and also in the myriad of responsibilities that they have, not just here in the United States, but globally. Thank you, Lord, in the way in which they are following the movements of your Spirit, not only in their call to education at NNU, but actually in their living out their vocation through your power and your guidance. Thank you for the friends and family that are around them while they're in the midst of this program. We pray, Lord, your grace on them. For Rafi, for her friends, for the recovery from illness, and for the sustaining grace in the midst of feeling poorly because of a cold or because of other physical ailments. Lord, we just pray your healing spirit to be with her and through her with her friends, whether those struggles are physical or emotional, whatever needs that really are a part of her community. We do trust, Lord, that your spirit is at work. For those who are not able to join us this evening, for whatever reason that might have prevented them from being present, Lord, I just pray that your spirit would be with each and every one of them, that you have kept them safe in this period of time, and that you will sustain them. I do suspect, Lord, even in this group, there might be other needs, perhaps things that we either feel are, too private to express, definitely within an online environment like this, or perhaps sometimes we just feel are too mundane to take the time to name. But we do trust that your spirit is at work in any and every circumstance that we have to provide healing presence, provide sustaining grace, to provide wisdom and enlightenment, and to provide hope for the future. I do pray your presence among us this evening, that in the midst of our dealing with technology and what seems like a very artificial environment, that we can trust that your spirit would bind us together, And through that self-same spirit, that our conversations, our interactions with each other might be such that if there is any enlightenment that comes, it comes by your spirit.
Yes.
And Lord, that it helps then us to better serve you in and through our learning.
Yes.
Pray this in Christ's name.
Amen.
Amen. So the first thing I really want to say is that part of this time is for you. These 3 video sessions are if you have an itch to scratch, a question to ask, you're free to do that. If this is just a good time to kind of, it is a little bit of ask the professor about things about the class. I could tell you about my dog Simba. I could tell you about the fact that I'm in Kansas City and the Chiefs are playing, and my dedication to be here online with you guys instead of down at the game. So there are a lot of things I could tell you about. But if you have questions about the class, anything that's just that you want to take time about, that's the first and the foremost reason for our meeting, is just get a chance to kind of engage each other and raise questions that you have. So anything that anybody wants to bring up at this point, any kind of questions?
Yeah, can you expound a little bit on what your expectations are around the book report? I've never actually done a book report, so I think it's different than a regular paper, and I'm just kind of looking for more information.
Okay, and I will give some of that as part of a presentation, but I will say there is last I checked, so let me do something very quickly. On the website under I'm going to share my screen for just a brief moment, but if you go on the website to the Canvas site and you look under, and sometimes these get closed on you, so just click on the arrow and it's under course syllabus and documents. At the very bottom of under course materials, there is how to write a book review. So that information is there, and that is that's actually knowing that for some people this might be the first time you've had to do this and this kind of a course. And Joel Green kind of gives you a nuts and bolts approach to how to put a book review together and what goes into that. So hopefully that'll help. I'll give more specific guidance to what I'm looking for in the book review we're going to do for the class. But that one is there just, how do I handle formatting? What's the balance of what I'm supposed to do? Joel Green's overview really does a pretty good job of providing that orientation. Okay.
I do have a question, I think kind of dovetails into the idea of formatting the essays. I tend to see reflection papers. I've also taught writing for 10 years. So I'm kind of thinking as a teacher as well as a student that historically reflection papers are a lot less formal. But when I hear the word essay, at least the way when I was teaching, you had the everything was very, very formal, title page, the whole business. And I want to make sure, because I'm posting my essays kind of informally, but then I'm attaching the older brother that's a lot more formally dressed. And so I just kind of want to make sure I'm on the right path on that. Some clarification would be lovely.
And I will say that the reason I use the language essay, so this is context does make a difference, having taught the course for a while, is that we used to just say post a forum response or and even the word reflection. And I would sometimes get material that wasn't well written and wasn't carefully thought through. So I started to drop the word essay as to remind people that even though we're posting online, that initial post is more as an essay quality. And I'm happy if it has an in-text citation, since it's over assigned reading. And if the in-text citation merely references the assigned reading and gives a page number or a location for those of you on Kindle, I'm good with that. If you mention a different book or something that you want to add, a lot of times it helps if you'll either provide a bibliographic reference so people know how to go find that book, or even an Amazon link, just so that happens. The 3 papers for formal grading, the 3 assigned larger papers, the book review, philosophy and theology, and the final strategy. That's where form and style, where you might have, if not a cover page, which normally doesn't work real well in an electronic environment, but you definitely have core information at the top of the first page. And then you choose to either use in-text citations following one of the form and styles, MLA, APA, or Chicago. All 3 have basically the parenthetical in-text citation model, or you use footnotes and you follow that. Either Chicago, and that's normally Chicago / Turabian, for those of you who know that shorter style guide. I do expect those for the bigger papers that you do submit. So that I hope that helps balance that out. But I always want to know when you mention an author's name in a reflection as a post, I'd like to know where that material comes from, mainly for the sake of your classmates. So I'll go ahead and name something I think all of you are starting to find out. We're covering a ton of material in the reading. And I'm giving you permission to sort of find yourself inside that material with what you think is important in light of your context, in light of what speaks to you, and sort of out of your professional background, always in conversation with education and formation. I am looking for those kinds of reflections. But I'm not asking you to summarize all of the material, not even asking for a clean synthesis of everything. It's really identifying what is important to you. And then what I'm hoping is, as we do that and we reply and interact with each other, we are constructing the knowledge around the reading together. Now, that means that when you find something that's important to you, we can't assume that somebody else in the class has found that exact same material and knows exactly where to go to find it. Okay, so by you citing where it is, if someone begins reading your post and you allude to Edie and Lamport, and they go, where was that? And as long as they have a page number, and I'll even concede location number, because usually you can kind of use those to sort of spot where you are in an e-version. Then if someone wants to follow up, they can at least go back and find that material and see where it's coming from. So I hope that's helpful. And I do want it written in essay qualities, probably in that first post in essay quality. I have had, obviously no one here has done this, but I have had experiences in the past where it felt a whole lot more like a social media post, or even I don't even know if we should use tweet anymore, but a Twitter, experience. And I'm like, nah, I don't really want that. I mean, I don't mind you finding what's important to you, but at least communicating it with enough clarity and precision that someone else could read that and understand what it is. And then the dialogue and the replies, that might become a little less formal, but I'm always trying to think, how are you bringing the reading back in, even in the replies? I mean, does it spark something that connected either to a previous week's reading, like Foster, or as we move further down the road, it just crosses over to another chapter in Edie and Lamport's book, or in Discovering Discipleship book, and you're starting to see points of connection. That's helpful. But if it does anything for you, a lot of this depends on how you were formed in your other classes. The readings are resources in the course, and the knowledge building is through our engagement with the reading and with each other. So sometimes I have to remind some students it's not a correspondence course. It really is an online interaction. And then the synthetic work comes in those major projects that you'll do in the class. And that's where you really begin to draw things together in such a way that it is important and it is useful. And I can begin to identify how you are using that material at a graduate level and when you get to those major papers. So does that help?
Mm-hmm.
Does that spark any questions from anyone else? No? Any other concerns?
I do. Sorry, that did leave one more question for me. Do we need to quote the book when we do a reply as well?
You can, or you could just say, well, this reminds me that it could be a very short paraphrase, or you could even comment and use a term, for instance, that, like, well, a good example would be if someone said, boy, this sounds like a kind of meaningful commemoration. And you know what that means. And somebody's going, what? Well, who said that? Well, that's out of Edie and Lamport. And you could just say, remember, and you could just use, again, parenthetical citation, Edie Lamport, and a page number. And that means for somebody else going, I don't quite remember that, they could go and find it. So when you read your replies, the best thing to ask about the replies is if you mention something out of the reading, could someone locate it? And you're not assuming that they know what you're talking about. I do know the replies also invoke a lot of contextual reflection. That's okay. You just hear the nudge in here, and no harm, no foul to anyone up to this point. I really want you to know that. This is where I've been doing a little bit of coaching. It's really to say, how are you dialoguing both with the person and with the content in the way in which you're engaging with each other? And that's just a good rule of thumb. And this is why, if you saw where I said minimum interaction is 2 to 3 posts, and that's usually about 80%. Usually it takes around 4 to 5 posts where a couple of those will have a kind of substantive engagement as a part of the post. And that just gives me enough to know that you're reflecting both toward the person and also reflecting on the reading simultaneously as a part of the interaction. And that's why I any more than that. So I will say this, for those of you who are used, some of you might have been in classes where you felt a lot of pressure to reply to everybody. Well, I don't want you to necessarily have to do that. You've already started to see, once you click on that button as replies slide in front of the screen, and you start to see the length of the reading at that point, that if someone replies to everyone, that can occupy a lot of white space. But I do want you to, 5 replies is half the class. And you start to do the math. That means that we have quite a number of engagements. And once you start kind of reading across those, you're getting a pretty good breadth of what the material has to offer just out of our interaction with each other. Hope that helps. I think Josh may be chasing somebody. Who knows at this point? Okay.
The children are inside, so now.
Okay, so herding cats is over, at least for the moment, and we're back. So blessings to you.
Exactly.
Okay. Anything else that's just kind of bugging you? And I literally, I've got other things to present, but I can always even record that and make that available. So always understand this is your time as well. Okay. Going once and twice. Okay. Well, I'm going to do a short presentation, and going to try to make it quick, but to kind of get you oriented. I mean, you did have that short video from me in the homepage. I hope you had a chance to see that right away. You're already being exposed to a lot of my other videos, and I'll be the very first one to say to you that, again, you're not trying to master that material either. It's just providing orientation to various perspectives around Christian education and formation, helping you to kind of think broadly. And there'll be even supplemental videos. And I will say it this way: if you have trouble sleeping at night, you can always start one of those videos about 15 minutes before bedtime, and they are better than melatonin. You will be out like a light, I promise you. So recognize that they can do more benefit than you realize. This always raises up my faculty evaluations at the end of the semester when somebody puts in, and I got a good night's sleep or 2 out of the class as well. So let me just say it that way. Okay. Let me share screen, and I will try to go through this pretty quickly. And Rafi, for you, if you do fall asleep in the middle of this, we will totally understand. Okay. So I'll do 2 things simultaneously. if I can, and you not see my lips move at the same time? That's always the question. Okay. Let me share screen. And I'll advance one once it's up. There we go. So let me just move this forward. So one way to think about this class is actually through the books that we're reading. They actually all fit together and they all point us toward the most important thing in the class, which is the final project, which is a strategy that hopefully you will design that will make a difference within the life of a congregation. That's the big picture. Now, for some of you, that might not be your primary ministry context. We might talk about navigation, but let me really explain where the course is designed to take us in and through the readings and hopefully get you up to about midway through the semester of what the expectations are. And then we'll talk about the congregational strategy, fleshing that out later in another one of these video presentations. So we've already begun reading, Charles Foster's book, either the blue copy or the yellow copy. It's the same book, just different covers. We've gotten into nurturing faith, and you've already been subjected to some of my crazy ideas through the book Discovering Discipleship, as along with my colleague, Mark Maddox, who used to teach at NNU, and Mark and I have had a long history together. We agreed a long time ago not to tell the students who wrote which chapter. So if you disagree with the chapter, that's Mark's chapter. That's not my chapter. And if you actually agree with the chapter, that's my chapter. That's not Mark's chapter. So we kind of clued it, and he'll do the same thing. He's done it in the past. So it's just equal opportunity. But these three books are really designed to kind of work as we go along in the semester and help us as we move forward all the way to the end. And they each bear different kinds of weights. So to begin with, one way to think about it is the first week, outside of talking about problems that face the church, and I always want to say, we start with those because every one of the books were written is in hopes of addressing problems. But it doesn't mean that that's all the church is about, is the problems, and we complain about it. We live in a very divided world these days, so focusing on problems seems to be an easy thing to do, when actually the goal is not to focus on the problems, but to look for ways of actually helping congregations be better, to use the words I'll use on more than one occasion, to be more faithful, not that they're faithless, not that they're totally bad, but how do we help congregations become more faithful in what they do? And so even though definitely Foster and Edie and Lamport start with what are some of the big problems out there in the world today that influence the church, Foster's a good example. He has one chapter on that, then he has 5 chapters on a solution. Edie and Lamport start with that, and then you have tons of reading really designed to move toward a solution. The book that Mark and I did, we were just trying to say, and what does Wesley have to offer, a Wesleyan viewpoint have to offer? So we just acknowledged that that was a muted voice inside this field of education and formation, and how might we be helpful by lifting that one up, not just for Nazarenes and Wesleyans, but actually for a broader community. And one way to think about it is all those authors together bring us voices from evangelical, ecumenical, and Wesleyan settings, and all of them are in conversation with each other. Mark Lamport's well known within evangelical circles. Fred Edie works more in mainline and ecumenical settings, though he himself doesn't always like that kind of language, even how he understands himself. Chuck Foster taught for a number of years at Candler and Emory, though he himself probably thinks him less of being just one branch of Christianity, and his work has really, I think, inspired as many people in the evangelical community as it's really reached out into a mainline or ecumenical kind of community. But all of them were really designed also to at least begin thinking about, how do you get around the congregation? How do you navigate local church and make sense of it? And Foster actually starts and he says, well, the best way to do this is to look for events that are transformative, find places where the church builds community, ask how churches make sense, make meaning, and where is it that churches work toward nurturing hope. And he has a chapter for each, and it's really, how do I wander around inside a church and kind of understand that congregation in light of these bigger rocks, these domains, if you will, alongside the programs that any congregation might have. But where, even in the non-formal or informal settings, might we see those different types of processes going on through these big rocks of his? Now, Edie and Lamport have their own. I already brought up meaningful commemorations and mutual disclosure. They talk about generous humility, intentional citizenship, and probing reflection, and faithful gestures. So they've got where Foster has 4, they have 6 sort of categories that they dedicate chapters to kind of bring people to understand their congregation through those lenses of interpretation. And if you looked at the book Mark and I did, the Sunday school answer is, I don't know what it means, but it must be the means of grace, and it must mean formation, discernment, and transformation. And all of these are just ways of wandering inside a congregation, asking, what does formation and education look like through these lenses, these interpretive lenses? You might think of Mark and I's as the trifocal version of that. And how do I make sense of my church out of these kind of big rock categories? For the sake of your final project, I recommend wholeheartedly Foster's book, because he gives you more exercises and gives you actually guidelines at the end on kind of how to write up that kind of engagement. If those 4 categories, and the reason is the 4 categories gives you plenty of time to wander around the church and do a pretty good job with it. If you think about the famous story of the 3 bears, if Edie and Lamport's 6 categories feel sort of like Papa Bear, and if formation, discernment, and transformation seem a little bit more like Baby Bear, then Foster might be more like Mama Bear, giving you just enough categories to kind of stretch you, but also giving you more resource ways of sort of engaging them. And if you're hearing me and going, I didn't get that down, that's okay. I exposed you to it week 1. Now you get to go back and begin to use the book as a tool as you move forward toward week 7. So in this class, a lot of times, if you're used to classes where you do a topic for a week and then you're done with it, been there, done that, give me the t-shirt, let's move to the next week. This class has a kind of rolling pattern where we'll engage material and it keeps constantly moving toward the final project. And week 1 was, how do you make sense of the church in context, inside its own context? And how do you make sense of that in light of these categories? That's what week 1 was really about. Now, I'm going to say that some of the things you want to keep in mind for your final project already are just stuff like the demographic information, the name, location, size, and history of the church. Take some time wandering around that church as a whole. Look for the best ways to capture the elements or processes. You can mention the program. So if your church has Sunday school and it has a women's study, you can mention those programs. But the processes are more around those big categories. And that's more, gives you a chance to ask questions about non-formal and informal things that are going on inside the ministry context, instead of just listening about your programs and thinking you've got that covered. Can you kind of give me a snapshot metaphor of the congregation? I mean, is it is it an evangelical congregation? Is it a congregation that tends to be really focused on high church or low church? Is it a congregation that really is more around a family kind of ministry, or is it more an evangelistically minded congregation? It doesn't have to be a big metaphor, but how would you characterize that congregation or ministry? Not caricature it, not reduce it to that, but just give me a sense of what that looks like. And what you're really trying to do is learn about that congregation. Your context is part of the class assignment. So that the more you draw out of the reading and thinking about your local context, that's just part of your learning that's going on in the class itself. You'll get to demonstrate that in the final assignment. It's what we've already invited you to start doing in your reflections with each other each week as well. and then the more it really is important, the more you can name your context, actually, then the more your interventions can be strategic. And depending on the size of the church or the ministry you're part of, I want to stress today, with that last project in mind, I'm not asking you to rewrite what that church ought to be doing. That is not our job. Our job is, in some ways, come alongside that church, discover what it is doing well, as much as also where some gaps might be, and then be strategic about what might help make that church better long term. And I will go ahead and say there is a rubric, so you can access that already, because that will also help you as we go forward. So starting week 1, we've already started working on your final project for the class. Now, we'll have a lot more to do, trust me, down the road, but that becomes part of what we're doing. As a matter of fact, your actual first assignment for this class, not where we are this week, but your first assignment is a little bit of a leapfrog from looking at the church in its own context to looking at the church in light of a little bit broader context. You're going to hear the language of Uri Bronfenbrenner later, but he has an ecological approach where you start with where someone is, and then you start thinking about the different ecologies around that person, moving from the closer ones like the family and the church, but then community, national, large movements. And if you felt, definitely when you were reading Edie and Lamport, you felt like they were really describing these large eddies and flows in society, Bronfenbrenner would say that's part of that broader context. How does that local congregation live within a broader setting and situation? And for this class, intentionally, we're bringing in basically Ann Streety Wimberly's book. And I mentioned her because she's a friend of mine, though Annie Lott Gilroy is also a good friend of mine as well. And we're going to be reading Lament and Advocacy to really bring in a tradition that will be, for some of you, will be familiar, but for others not. And we're doing that just to kind of broaden our windows of perspective as we think about our local context. We're hearing other voices speak into our situation. And the book From Lament to Advocacy is part of that. So, yeah, your first major assignment is not this week, it's coming up. Actually due at week 3, at the end of week 3, and it's an assignment at the end of week 3 to prepare you for discussion in week 4. So you might think we're going from week 1 and we're leapfrogging to week 4 with that first major assignment. And it's only 3 to 5 pages as a book review. So Melissa, this will be a little bit different even than what Joel will say. And I'm going to prompt you thinking about that first assignment, since this is the one time we could talk with each other. Bottom line, all I'm asking you to do is kind of read the introduction and sort of the first 3 chapters carefully to gain sort of an overall understanding of the motivation and the thesis of the book. And you might look at the epilogue. So I'm already telling you where the major components of the book are, and those can help you write what might be understood more the traditional book review. But since this is a book of multiple chapters, and memory serves me, I don't have this one memorized. There are there are 8 chapters and the epilogue and the introduction. So there are 10 sections in the book. Basically, I'm saying identify the first 5, and then look for a couple more chapters that you think intrigue you. Beyond those, that front end and that epilogue, find a couple more chapters that you just the title of it. You could scan the rest of the book quickly and just see a couple of other chapters that just sort of intrigue you and what the authors are trying to do. And as a result of that, then you can think about which chapters best speak to your context. Which of these chapters actually work best in conversation with your context out of the remaining chapters. And then you close the paper with kind of a general reflection over the book in light of your ministry context, but also in light of the class. And trust me, 3 to 5 pages, 1,250 words is not a really long writing. And if you have not written a lot of book reviews, this is where Joel Green will help you, because he'll talk about how you can sort of identify the thesis and the flow of the argument, and you name that right away. And then you begin to unpack certain salient points you think that are helpful. And then you close with a general reflection on the implications and application of the reading as a whole in light of this class. So that, I mean, I'm hoping you're hearing that's not a super challenging, but we are sort of, and Melissa, to you, we're giving you a chance to start honing your writing skills with this first assignment, knowing exactly where to go and what to be looking for is a part of it. And that first assignment is done really to help you work with an identified text to sort of hone a little bit of the writing skills before you have to write your first independent essay academic paper, which is the philosophy and theology paper. So as a matter of fact, where are we now in the meantime? Because that's not coming up again for another until we get to the end of next week that it's due. Well, this week and next week are actually helping kind of think through the theology of or philosophy of education and formation. And as you've already seen, the books really function differently. Discovering Discipleship, when we put it together, we really wanted to work on snapshots across different categories, and Bible and church history. And we wanted to kind of keep all things Wesleyan as we talked about it. So that's how our book was designed to begin with. It's not supposed to be exhaustive. Nurturing Faith, because of that evangelical and ecumenical standpoint, the reading you're doing this week and next week will feel more systematic in nature. They're actually following what, those of you who've ever had a systematic theology class or had an introduction to theology, even if you look at their chapters, and if you have not paid close attention to their introductions to the different parts, if you've kind of skipped over that, they work really hard to keep you connected in each section, each part, so that you know exactly how the book's organized. But these chapters we're reading right now really do have more of a kind of systematic feel of beginning with, well, what is the nature of revelation? What's the nature of humanity? You know, what is the work of Jesus? What's the implications of that for the body and then for Christian character, and our living that out in light of the hope of the resurrection. And they're almost following more of a systematic outline. And obviously they make more use of philosophy than Mark and I did in our book. We decided not to dedicate a chapter to that. And that's one reason why I use Lampert and Eady in the class. So I'm watching the clock, so stay with me. And next week is more the same, but there's also some special themes that you'll encounter that are kind of true to Wesleyan perspective, and the kind of conundrum sometimes that people within the Wesleyan Church also have to deal with, including this gnarly little thing called baptism, which was actually back in the day more Mark's interest, but has become part of my interest as well. And we'll talk about, as you've already heard, this ancient future term, catechesis, and what the early church was trying to accomplish. So you'll still get some of that kind of conversation. And I would just say these 2 weeks are a good time to start making notes, maybe if nothing else, using a highlighter or using Post-it notes to find key terms and phrases, because the work we're doing in this week and next week actually go to your second writing assignment, which is that theology and philosophy of formation and education. Now, it's not due until the end of September, it's week 5. But when I designed the class, I wanted to give you plenty of time so that as you have read through the material this week and next week, you can let it simmer. You can begin to identify what's important to you before you finally wrote that paper. When I first started teaching this class, we used to drop that theology and philosophy paper on the students at the end of week 3. And it lined up nicely with the content, but it also blew students right out of the water. I mean, and particularly and I'll say this, for some of you, this is not new material, but for some of you, it is new. I mean, even the categories are new. Joshua, I'm thinking of you with a business background, and there are probably moments you're reading the theology and you kind of feel kind of like Rhonda in that Queen Elizabeth outfit. That that Toto, we are not in, we're not in North Carolina, we're not in Kansas. It's just new material. And so I did want to give you at least a week or so to really start identifying what's important to you about your theology, your philosophy, and there'll be guidelines. You'll see those, but it gives you a chance to sort of write it up. It's probably of the major assignments in the class, it's the one piece that you will take out of the class and you'll carry with you. One way to think about it, it'll be your creed of what you think is important when it comes to a good, faithful theology and philosophy of education and formation. It may not be finished. You may continue to think about it, but it's the one piece that we want you to feel comfortable with, because you're going to use that then to start assessing how to help that local congregation we've been talking about be more faithful in their own education and formation. And it's your theological lens that you'll have at the end of week 5 that will guide some of the strategies that you adopt in weeks 6 and 7 to go into your final paper. As a matter of fact, you'll take that philosophy and theology project, and I'm going to ask you to boil it down more to a kind of mission statement that speaks into a given context of ministry in your local church. And that will be part of the final assignment, but you'll be writing that mission statement based on your comfort level out of that big paper in the middle of the class. That's your theology and philosophy. So at that point, after you've written that, we're reading the material now, but once you've kind of written that, we'll have already been starting to move into, so how do I engage that local church? How do I make a difference? How do I move from this assessment that I've already started to identifying very specific kinds of interventions that I might suggest? What age level might that be applied to? How do I organize? How do I come up with ideas that will be strategic? And all of that you'll be reading and thinking about the last couple of weeks of the class. But I hope you hear how the whole course works together. Also, by then, you'll have been listening to a ministry context carefully. It'll also be informing what you're doing right alongside our class interactions. And you'll be bringing all of that work across the first 6.5 weeks into that final writing project. And hopefully you won't be asking yourself, I hope, I'm praying, that you won't be asking yourself in the middle of week 7, what am I supposed to write? Because you'll have already been building pieces of it as this very short 7-week semester unfolds. Okay. So I hope this gives you kind of a feel. I'm looking at the clock and I'm also knowing the Chiefs are playing. So I'll name it for what it is. But I hope that gives you kind of a general feel of how the class flows, and listen to you that, there's helps for the writing and how each piece sort of informs the other as we go along. And I think by the end of the semester, the trade-off, you'll tell me, obviously also in the class evaluation, is that all the pieces we're doing as we move along begin to culminate and gel into that final project. And they're going to look different because your contexts are different, but the faithfulness will also be based out of your passions, and they'll be based out of a wealth of resources that come out of the readings. You just get to think about the ones that are most important in light of your ministry, not do a data quiz or do those kinds of things as part of your final assignment. Okay. Now,
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Rhonda.
I'm not involved in a ministry per se. In my church, I've only been there about 2 years. I serve on the worship team. I'm the guitar player in the back. And I sometimes lead when the pastor and his wife are not there, but I don't have a formal ministry there. And so I know this is all new and it'll maybe come into greater clarity as the course goes along, but I'm just thinking, I wouldn't even know where to begin. I haven't been there long enough, and Tony Sparrow is my pastor and he's wonderful. And very engaged and doing a lot in his church with education. So I'm just thinking, I don't know where I would fit into this bigger picture. I don't know.
And everybody will kind of be, for some people, Kyle, I think for you, you're like, oh, help me. I'm already up to my earlobes in my church. So this will just be a part of it. But Rhonda, for you, this is where maybe you still are active in that church. You have a perspective to look at. If it means inviting yourself in and asking the pastor for a conversation, or if there's a discipleship pastor sitting down going, so this is the things I see. Are there things I'm missing? Let that be part of the dialogue. Since Tony, and I'll just say it this way, since Tony is one of my former students, going way back to my days at Trevecca, you
Right.
tell Tony that his old professor said he's supposed to help you, and he doesn't have a choice. So you can use my name, not in vain, but you can use my name, and that's okay. But I we'll have people here who have different levels of engagement with the church. And this is why I want you to start now, so that as you build that strategy at the end, it could be something you could hand to them and they could say, well, this actually could work. This might be helpful. So I've used this kind of assignment with other classes of similar form in other schools, usually across a 14-week semester. And in those situations, I even I have the student find a supervisor or a reader inside the church to actually read the final project and evaluate. In this class, with just 7 weeks, we don't really have the time. I mean, even trying to negotiate that would be difficult at times. So, but you can still think about the congregation as a whole and start with what you know. Because truthfully, and I'll just say it this way, even if you've been in a church and you've grown up in it, as Melissa has, and that's one thing, but if you take an assignment at another church, you're going to start all over again. You may even, quote, think you're in charge, but you're starting to learn that church afresh and anew. And I'm hoping some of the skill sets that we develop in the class are transportable as we move from one congregation to the next. And that's one reason why I will say to everyone, your final strategy for the church might be modest, because you're there to help that church become more faithful and not try to prescribe massive changes inside that setting, because you're actually working with where the congregation lives, not necessarily trying to force it to be something it's not. And most of the time, if we start in conversation with the church to begin with, that begins to work pretty well as the semester comes along. The only time, and I've not had this problem at the graduate level, I have had this problem at the undergrad, where I would do these kinds of assignments, and then undergrads would drop a kind of a atomic bomb of their perfect church onto the congregation at the end of the class. And it was, and it's like, this is not going to help anyone. But I'm trusting that by the time you finish this class, you actually have something that you can go, I've learned a lot, but this actually can help my local congregation a little bit. And the pastor goes, well, these two things might not work, but this one actually seems to make sense. Let's see how that might actually apply in this setting. So that would be the dream, is that you'd have something that through this thought experiment, you've learned how all these theories and concepts and ideas actually do reach at least a level of application in one setting. But at the same time, that setting's benefited from that experiment. That, to me, I think is a really good 7 weeks put together. Anybody else? Any other questions or concerns? No? All hearts clear, or somebody watching the game, you could tell me what the score is right now?
I had a question about mentors.
Yes, Emily.
Well, I haven't met with mine yet, and then so have I lost it? Where are we?
I'm going to say something. The whole mentor program piece is a widget that's put in here.
Okay.
That Sam's really good with, and that's a program expectation. So it's not a part of the course per se, though if your mentor's at that church, this is a great time to start that conversation in light of that. But NNU's grad program has an expectation around the mentoring that is program wide. And then it just gets inserted into the classes. And we do, it can affect your grade. It really can do that. But that's when I normally say that you need to have a conversation with the office
Okay.
where you are in that part of the program. I don't think anyone's in trouble yet. I normally get Sam contacts me if that happens, but usually she takes lead on that because it's really a program expectation.
Okay. Makes sense.
And you don't want professors meddling with program expectations. You, of all people, should know that since you're part of it. So, but but if this gives you excuse to have that conversation early and say, oh, by the way, I've got this project that we're doing. Would you be, even though you're working with the church and I know you're between leaders, but even if you go, would you mind giving me a little bit of an outside perspective as I work on this? Mm-hmm. If the class builds a point of conversation, let it work for you. But it's not mandatory.
Okay.
Right? Anyone else? I know, and Rafi and I've had this conversation in the past. Now, sometimes the ministry doesn't look completely churchy, but one thing I always encourage is thinking about the ministry as a whole and how it would fit within that kind of a context, and trying to think about how you can sort of expand. And I will say this: if there is a kind of constraint, if it is the Sunday school answer for this class, it's always about education and formation. So there could be a lot of interventions. There could be evangelistic interventions. There could be therapeutic interventions. There could be compassionate ministry interventions. But how are you helping that ministry in the way in which it engages education and formation is the most important question. That's how this course is designed to help you. So be sure to be thinking about that as a part of what goes on. Okay. All right. Well, know that I'm available. You can shoot me an email if you need to and follow up, or if you need a phone conversation, we can do that. I'm fairly busy, not just because of teaching, but actually I inherited a small project, courtesy the Lilly Endowment, of a funded grant that we received at the seminary that has gotten me running 1,000 miles an hour. So I get busy, but I'll create space if we can schedule a time. And just know I'm praying for you. For some of you, this is class number 1. For some of you, and I know I didn't get a chance to join us, this is the last class. And so my goal is either to give you a good beginning or at least help you finish. And so that's the goal. So don't be shy. Let me know how we can work together. The biggest mistake you can make in this class is falling behind. Name that, because it really, every week comes, it goes, and I hope you begin to sense the readings build on each other. So once you start getting behind, it's kind of like it really is kind of like a language. Once you start getting behind, catch up can be extremely painful. So try to figure out how to kind of stay in rhythm. You don't have to master everything, but having that familiarity so you move from one week to the next with a sense of comfort. You can always go back and find things, but that's different from never knowing where to go to look. That's probably the one caution I would have to say. Okay? Mm-hmm. All right. Blessings, everyone. Have a good evening. And good care. We'll see you.
Bye.